That was a very, very powerful session. You can't help but really have a heavy heart at the same time as you hear that about what it is that we are doing as human beings to not help each other heal sometimes, but we're actually helping each other to be even more wounded as we have been. I'm a lifelong educator, so I'm going to talk with you from a very focused and also a very biased, yet a very passionate point of view that I do believe anything and everything all have to do with education. And when I'm talking about education, I'm not talking about the education system, if you will. Think about the formal education where things happen within the four walls. And then perhaps even more importantly, the education system that we live on a daily basis outside of the schoolhouse. What you just heard in the last session was much about that education system that happens outside of the classrooms, outside of the formal system, if you will. So I see education is a life, and life is in itself an education. We learn something every day. I just learned something new in the last hour. And if you happen to believe that our souls progress from one life to another, then I would use education as that metaphor, as the soul of our humankind, progressing from one generation to the next. So if you think about how the education system is supposed to be getting better all the time. Again, I want to reemphasize that don't think about just things that happen inside the schoolhouse. The system in which we live by, that is a system in itself. And I'm actually not going to talk about the progression of the soul as an education system. That's too complicated and another day of topic. But today, I'm going to just talk about something very simple. That is, describing education is as concrete as just like a spaceship. I use that as a metaphor, which is the spaceship is our current day most sophisticated, most advanced vehicle for flight. So if you will, for today, follow along some of the thoughts that I will share with you to think about the education system as that vehicle for launching our healing flight. You see, even as we've been to space and back, but we really haven't taken off. You know, Armstrong said in 1969, when he landed on the moon, was, what did he say, one small step for man, but one giant leap for mankind. So we physically made that flight to the height, but mankind truly, if they think about it, we haven't taken off yet. Our flight vehicle has design flaws, so we cannot take off. That's kind of the premise of my conversation with you today. The education system, we just heard that it's both, I keep saying formal and informal because as an educator, I often am biased. For me, because I live so close to it, when I think about education system, often I think about the system that I have been living in a formal sense. But really, it's equally important that exists here in the United States and worldwide. And if we look at education as a system, or a process, or a mechanism that help us be, then how has that being looked like? Think about it. Education has helped us to be. Whatever that be is, And that being is who we are and how we are together. So how does that being look like, feel like so far? And what is it that being should be? I don't know if you watched the show Dog Whisper. Maybe you watched the show Dog Whisper. Whatever the problems of that dog have, and I keep wanting to watch the next episode, just like, the next problem must be the dog. No, never fails. The problem is always what the dog master, right? It's never the dog. So why is that? It's that process that we created, that system. So the education system, the system we have, is supposed to empower. It's supposed to empower us, make us better, elevate us, because that's, after all, the difference between a human being and other kind of species of animal. But it's so many times that it actually, the system itself creates that powerlessness, creates that helplessness that we just heard about. And we're supposed to have breakthroughs of new discovery about what we are and what is it that we can be, yet the system has existed as a system of perpetuations. And we certainly can talk about education as a system that helps us to think a little bit differently. It's supposed to help us have open minds. But you know, the research has shown, I don't know if some of you have heard about the research on divergent thinking. You know what divergent thinking is? The ability to think creatively. So when a child, 6-year-old, first enters the school, we may take this object and say, okay, tell me what are all the different things you can think about using this object for. And the child may come up with a dozen, half a dozen, more than a dozen ways of how this thing can be. You know? It could be a vehicle, it could be a toy, it could be whatever. It'll come up with all kinds of creative ways. And then as the child progresses in the education system, that divergent thinking actually becomes smaller and smaller. So what is it that we are doing as an education thinking system, even just helping the mind grow or the mind diminishing? The education system, really the DNA, if you think about it, hasn't changed a whole lot. For the most part, it hasn't, for me, if we're going back to the vehicle analogy, it hasn't left the stagecoach era. And we haven't even reached the automobile era in a vehicle for human transportation. And it certainly is not anywhere to flight. Hasn't reached the Wright brothers era in trying to look at flight for human beings, let alone the spaceship for us to take over. I can tell you from inside the schoolhouse, thinking about calendars, school calendars, that was created back in the agricultural society, yet we resist in changing the calendar to meet the needs of students. It has nothing to do with pedagogy, but as a cycle of agricultural harvest season versus the cycle of our students' learning. So the success and outcome that we have talked about, really, I think we have focused on one side of the bell curve. We can cite all kinds of successes, but if you turn your head to the middle of the bell curve, or worse yet, to the other side of the bell curve, what we're finding is many, many disappointments from the system as an outcome. So our system should be designed as an open system, yet we're finding that doors are actually closed more than open. So what does the education system have to do with our human potential? Did the education system make the difference for those whom we admire? I wonder a lot of times that with their superhuman capacities, was it education that help make the difference for them. Or if we knew that, we would then certainly duplicate that design, won't we? To help everyone become Madame Currie, to be Betty Edwards, the Magnus Carlsen or Einstein. We will want to duplicate what made the difference for them, because we do believe what they're capable of, the rest of the population are also. If we knew how to use that engine, use the process to uncover that. And for me, I think about my son, my husband is a science fiction, watches science fiction all the time. So from time to time, I get a glimpse of that. And this one show is called Stargate, where people discover a way of traveling from one side of the world, and they go through this round gate, and they go into the other side of the world. That's about as much I know about that show. But that in itself is the captivating part for me, and making the analogy that I always thought, if we know how to uncover a way, a vehicle to pass through that gateway to another world, to discover the true human potentials, wouldn't that be wonderful? So you see, we learn a lot of basic lessons from nature, and I think that we need to be with nature a lot more to understand that the first condition, if we want to fly as a humankind, the first condition of flight for birds is what? To have two wings working, right? We heard that earlier. A broken winged bird will forever be grounded. So the fact that human beings have not yet taken off is quite simple. If we examine it, we will understand that very easily. That when I remember when I first came to that revelation, I heard about the description of mankind being the bird, that each wing, one male and one female. I thought that metaphor was so powerful. I get it. And it doesn't matter where you look in the world, that female wing, as we just heard, is weakened, and the bird just can't take off, let alone soar or go anywhere at all. The education system can strengthen that wing. Of course, in fact, we have to strengthen both wings equally to be equally strong and to have that balance. And really, what we're talking about is that balance of the both, the complementary motion of the two wings, the strength of the two wings, really making that flight possible as the first simple condition for human flight. And the question, of course, is how do we then go about achieving that balance? And how do we go about building the strength for both wings to achieve that flight? If we can answer that question, that would really be good. So, what I'm talking about today is really the design. To design that system, we have to understand our current conditions. And we can look every corner of this world and find what we don't wish to find. See the painful conditions of many who are the walking wounded today. So how are the weakened, that broken wing, how can we fix that? How can we design something that could truly change the future? Because if the education is about programming, then all of that programming, it's not anywhere. It's just right here, isn't it? It's all about the programming of what we have walking with us every day. Then how do we go about building the mind of the future, which is what we need? What is the mindset of the future that we must have? If we say that it is about the programming, and I don't pretend to know all of the programming of designing new programming or reprogramming or the fixes that we have, because I know we have premier eminent psychologists here in the audience. So for me, I came to a startled enlightenment, I guess. As parents, we always think about what is it that we're doing that is helping our children or damaging our children. And never did it come to light so powerfully this last year when my daughter was certified to be a blind dog trainer. So she would bring the dogs into the house babysitting, and I came to expose to these guide dogs who are wonderful, wonderful, very smart, intelligent, sensitive dogs. And they have to pick the best of the best to be able to be a guide dog for the blind. So this one, Treasure, she said, was for this cycle among the dozen dogs, Treasure was the best, the prize winner of this bunch that they're training. So when I first met Treasure, I was amazed how just the amazing capacity and intellect and the personality of this dog. And Treasure was going to be the star. Well, 6 months later, my daughter was babysitting Treasure again. A different dog. In fact, she told me it doesn't look like Treasure was going to make it. It was night and day. And what happened is that what the trainer would do, every little thing the trainer would do, whether it would accentuate the innate potential of that dog or it would reshape that dog, sometimes to the point where it no longer can function because it's like that guide dog. And for Treasure, what happened was totally accidental. But the incident that was so strong in my mind, thinking about what we do with my students in school, but as parents with children, was that the trainer accidentally dropped a whole bunch of pots and pans in the kitchen. And it shattered my Treasure. And it had hurt her nerve so badly that it changed her entire being, the entire spirit of who Treasure was as a dog. And you think about that, you know, we talked about the monkeys and dogs, and if you just translate that into what is it that we do, intentionally or unintentionally, the impact and the effect of our human beings is at a totally different level. So, building the minds of the future is such an important and fragile business. The future of education, no doubt about it, is critically important to the well-being, We just heard about the well-being of humankind, all of us. So like I said, I am biased and passionate about what it takes, what this kind of scenarios wakes me up at night and thinking about what is it that our system has and don't have. So if we look at the system, just on the knowledge transfer itself alone, we should have serious concerns. Even how we deliver knowledge in a very compartmentalized, very divisive way, very competitive way. So let alone a system that is going to allow us to take a different kind of flight as humankind. So the future of education needs a radical shift. For me, is yesterday. And we're going to do it together. I put the word design there because the human design has not worked. We have to design it by transcending ourselves. What you see here, the list of things I want to re-emphasize, to me, when we design a different kind of system, what I put down a few elements. It really is the very beginning, the first stage. There's a lot more design work to be done. So what I present here is really supposed to be in the education system for the humankind is at the kindergarten level. of restarting over. The curriculum needs to be very carefully examined. The content of what we're transferring and passing down from generation to generation. So at the very kindergarten level, I say that the design needs to have both the balance of the science and the art. It's like a yin and a yang. You have to have the hard evidence. And let's begin to include our informal or informal education system with the science about discovering the evidence about women. And the art is using that universal language in a variety of ways for women. And the quality of the curriculum that's inside, again, inside the schoolhouse or in our daily lives. Think about the content, the messages that we are transferring. It needs to have that holistic curriculum to include women. And the presence is really the participation in all domains of our life, for girls and for women. And the partnership is really about not doing alone, not only reaching out to our male partners, but more importantly, we are reaching out to our global partners, because there are many others who have the like minds. We can weave that net together. And then the diversity is embracing the difference, embracing the differences of women. And all of which we can talk a lot more in depth about every single one of them. And leadership, most importantly, women and girls are not just at the table, but they are in leadership roles. And being included in the critical, important decision-making process. And you can look at, just in the United States, in the walks of life, from politics to health to business to science, the avoidance of women leaders' presence is abundance. And then lastly, is really, we can't do it without having that strong foundation of using spirituality that takes us to a whole different level. There are many efforts, the good news is, throughout the world are doing the redesigning work. In 1995, I attended the International Women's Conference in Beijing. In 1995, I led a group of 25 women administrators from universities and colleges there. And that platform, I wish we had another one, that was 1995, long ago now. The platform of action is an agenda for women empowerment. And it aims at removing all the obstacles for women's active participation in all spheres of public and private lives worldwide. And more importantly, is looking for that equilibrium for women on the social, political, cultural, educational decision-making process, here at home, abroad, everywhere in the world. And we talked about in 1995 with the women from all over the world that equality is a matter of human rights and the condition for social justice. The condition for social justice. So women around the world, I learned in a very personal, hands-on level in 1995 are doing a lot of things. In 1985, the conference was in Kenya, and the overabundance of the African women talking about their grassroots efforts in a 10-year span and the progress they had made was astounding and very, very moving. I'm giving you a few examples of, I know, because I rather focus on what is going to be. What is the work that we are going to be involved, and perhaps not avoiding to understand the plight of the girls that we just heard about. But equally important, as I said, understanding what is going on, but more importantly so, let's put our focus and energy also putting in the design work for the future. Because when there is no plan, we will not have the dream come true. So Development and literacy is a project that I'm involved with, so I know it in a very personal level, the kind of work they're doing in developing schools. When we started, it was developing schools for girls in the remote area of Pakistan. And now, I'm so proud to say we have 178 schools in all 4 provinces of Pakistan, and that number is rising and making a difference in the lives of those girls that already in the year span we have, creating a change in their local societies. Well, the other work here at home is work that I've been involved with, is Women on the Move Network. And one of the key programs that we have is Who's Your Hero program. Little did I know I was going to have Barbara Moreno, that being the executive director of the program. It's designed for girls aged 9 to 11. Here for the girls who come from very low socioeconomic class homes, so that we can help them, empower them, to mentor them, to guide them, so that they come to see that they are the heroes of their own lives. And the Kaleidoscope Institute that I'm involved with is about designing leadership development programs for women of color in higher education. This is in the last 20 years, I've seen the strength of women gaining from year to year. And many other countries have very, very deliberate, conscious efforts. I wish the U.S. would do the same. Brazil, as an example, started in the 1980s, and in a short 17-year span, deliberate, conscious, focused effort in looking at equalizing school-age children for girls. And they increased from 80 to 97, it was from 74% of enrollment to 94% enrollment. And there are other countries like Indonesia making the same kind of progress throughout the world. And yet in the United States, we do not have equalized conditions for many of the children here. So the impact, according to Duran, education, is that transmission of civilization from one generation to the next. So what exactly are we transmitting? Research has shown over and over, multiple studies, multiple countries, with strong indicators of the impact of education for girls and women directly, positively correlated to poverty level, to economic growth, to community participation, to workforce, to leadership, you can name it. And when I talked about the International Women's Conference, let me give you the 12 critical agenda areas that the women set out to accomplish in the years to come. And the years to come has been the years to come. And it will be disheartening, actually, if we will review what the progress has been. And that is women in poverty, women in health, violence against women, women in armed conflict, women in economy, women in power and decision-making, institutional mechanism for advancement of women, human rights for women, women in media, women in the environment, and finally, as we just talked about, the girl child. I was so happy when I learned in 2011, last year, the Nobel Prize Peace winners were 3 women for their work in nonviolent struggle for safety of women, and also for their work for defending, advocating for the rights of women in peacemaking work. I think that deserves a big celebration. I want to talk about this. Our role. What is you and I role? We can celebrate ourselves in being here, giving up our Sunday afternoon here. That's not enough. Listening and just cheering inside. We have to turn that into action. Is because I think Rockefeller who said that for every right we have responsibility. For every privilege we have we have obligations, and for every possession we have duties to do. So we have to turn this empathetic feeling, this yearning, this power, the fire, into real action. That's what we need to do, get out of our seats and put action behind it. And be a martyr. It takes courage to lead the revolution for change. Change is necessary. And the middlemen, we have to continue to see ourselves as a middleman, facilitating that transformation that is needed. And first of all, we heard this before from Gandhi, we be the change we want to see. And connecting the partners, be the matchmaker, and be the scientist, always presenting the evidence of what the human flight is requiring. And finally, be the champion to advocate and stand for equity and justice. Now, Margaret Mead's quote has always been a powerful one for me, and the International Women Conference in 1995 of the African women who are doing grassroots efforts and starting in a 10-year span. Like I said, what they have done in 10 years was amazing. So Margaret Mead's quote came to life for me in 1995, when she said, "A small group of thoughtful people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So don't ever underestimate when our number is small. In fact, I put the brain wave there because that came from the University of Michigan. University of Michigan, the brain scans of a small group of people actually could predict the action of the universe population. Can you believe that? While this finding is relevant to market research, while the finding they have used to help smokers stop smoking and reduce death, but if they could do that, what is it that we cannot do with this particular finding alone to create the kind of change we want to see and to create the kind of powerful influences that we want to have for our world? So the true flight of humanity, we will take off. It's in our destiny. But we will take off as humankind and we will soar. Whether it's in a spaceship or whether it's in some other device, it will only be achieved. And we can only get there through building up the two wings and to have the balance, and build the strength behind that balance, to let that be the fuel that will drive us. So I invite you, not just be a passive participant in this effort, listening to the talks that we give, but actually become, first of all, deeply engaged in that reflective thinking, but then truly actively engaged, involved in everyday efforts in organizations like this, in organizations around your neighborhood, in your schools, with your neighbors, in your faith organizations that actually have the action behind and building of that other wing to be strong. That's the only way. So I challenge you to help us build that balance and fuel the strength so that we can take off sooner than later. Thank you.